A few years ago, my girlfriend Megan and I were driving from Ohio down to the Gulf Coast for a vacation. It was a brutal drive, nearly 16 hours, and I was determined to make it without stopping overnight. Megan disagreed from the beginning. She kept telling me I was going to fall asleep at the wheel if I kept pushing myself. About 10 hours into the trip, I realized she was right. It was well after midnight, and I was struggling to keep my eyes open. Every few minutes, I'd catch myself blinking longer than I should have. Megan had already searched for a place to stay and found a small roadside motel a few minutes off the interstate. I wasn't thrilled about it, but I was too exhausted to argue. The motel sat at the end of a narrow access road surrounded by trees. It looked like something built decades ago and barely updated since. There were only a handful of parking spaces and almost all of them were empty. I pulled into the lot and shut off the engine. "Finally," Megan muttered as she stretched. The entire property was quiet. No traffic, no people outside, just a few buzzing lights hanging from the building. I walked into the office while Megan stayed in the car. An older woman was sitting behind the desk reading a magazine. She looked surprised to see a customer at that hour. I checked in, grabbed the room key, and headed back outside. Our room was room 7, located at the far end of the building on the ground floor. Inside, it was exactly what you'd expect from a cheap motel. A bed, a small TV, a tiny bathroom, nothing special. At that point, it didn't matter. We just wanted sleep. After bringing our bags inside, we took turns brushing our teeth and getting ready for bed. While unpacking, I realized I'd left my charging cable in the truck. I groaned. The parking lot was only a short walk away, so I told Megan I'd be right back. She was already half asleep. I stepped outside and left the door slightly cracked behind me. The lot felt different now. When we'd arrived, the office lights had been on. Now they were off. The entire property seemed darker than before. The only illumination came from a few weak exterior lights attached to the building. I unlocked my truck and started searching through the center console. For some reason, I couldn't find the charger right away. I spent a minute digging around before finally spotting it wedged between some receipts. The moment I stood up, my stomach tightened. Someone was standing near our room. At first, I thought it was Megan. Then I realized the figure was far too large. The person was a man. He stood directly beside our door, not knocking, not walking, just standing there. The distance made it difficult to make out details, but I could tell he was watching the room. I immediately started walking back. As I got closer, he finally turned toward me. The man was tall and broad-shouldered. He wore a long, dark coat despite the weather being fairly warm. The strangest thing was his expression. He looked completely calm, almost cheerful. "Evening," he said softly. His voice barely rose above a whisper. I stopped a few feet away. "Can I help you?" I asked. The man smiled. "Oh no, just getting some fresh air." I glanced toward the empty parking lot. There wasn't much to look at. "You're staying here?" He nodded immediately. "Upstairs." Something about the answer felt rehearsed. I couldn't explain why. I simply nodded. "Well, have a good night." "You too," he replied. I unlocked the door and stepped inside. The second I entered, I locked it. Megan was already under the blanket. "You okay?" she asked. "Yeah." I didn't tell her what happened. At least not yet. Instead, I stood quietly near the door, listening. I expected to hear footsteps moving away. I heard nothing. No footsteps. No doors opening. Nothing at all. That bothered me more than if he'd walked away. Curiosity got the better of me. I crouched near the window and carefully pulled back a corner of the curtain. My pulse immediately jumped. The man was still there, exactly where I'd left him. Standing motionless in front of our room, just staring. He wasn't looking at the parking lot. He wasn't looking at the sky. He was looking directly at our door. I watched for nearly 5 minutes. He never moved. Not once. Eventually, I stepped away from the window and finally woke Megan up completely. She could tell from my face something was wrong. I explained everything. At first, she thought I was overreacting. Then I told her to look for herself. Reluctantly, she crawled over to the window. A few seconds later, she whispered, "He's gone." I felt relief wash over me, until she suddenly froze. Then she gasped. "What?" I asked. She pointed across the parking lot. I moved beside her and looked out. The man was there, standing near the opposite building, facing our room, facing our window. Even from that distance, it felt like he knew exactly where we were. The sight made my skin crawl. Neither of us said anything for a moment. The man simply stood there, watching. Eventually, I closed the curtain. Neither of us wanted to look anymore. For the next hour, we stayed awake listening. A few times, we thought we heard footsteps outside. Once we heard what sounded like someone walking slowly past the window, but we never worked up the courage to check. At some point, exhaustion finally won. We drifted off to sleep. When I woke up, sunlight was shining through the curtains. The first thing I did was look outside. The parking lot was empty. No sign of the man. No sign that he'd ever been there. We packed our things as quickly as possible and headed for the office. The same woman from the night before was working. I handed over the room key and casually mentioned the strange man we'd seen outside. Her expression immediately changed. "What man?" she asked. "The guy staying upstairs." She frowned. "There wasn't anyone upstairs." I laughed nervously. "No, there definitely was." She shook her head. "You two were the only guests here last night." The words hit me like a punch. I asked if maybe another guest had checked out early. Again, she shook her head. "No one else rented a room." I looked out toward the empty parking lot. "Do you have security cameras?" "No, sir," she replied. "Never needed them." Megan and I exchanged a glance. Neither of us knew what to say. We thanked the woman and left. As we drove away, I kept looking in the mirrors expecting to see that man somewhere on the property. But he was gone. To this day, I still don't know who he was, where he came from, or why he spent half the night watching our room. What I do know is that if we'd stayed there another night, I don't think either of us would have slept at all.